This might feel weird, but you know what? When I work in a greenhouse, right, and the number of people who don't understand how soil works, if you don't, then everything else is going to fall apart on you. Like, I see them watering, and if they just feel like they need to turn the pressure right up, and you're just ruining your soil, you're ruining the plants. And so in order to really get the plant to grow properly, even though we have peat moss as soil, so it's not even dirt, it's just peat moss, the whole soil structure is just actually critical to getting your garden to flourish. So that's why I'm going to go into a bit more detail than what you might have expected, and I hope to flush it out, and in the end, you'll understand why your garden may be doing something. Another example is at the greenhouse again. Doesn't mean that anyone knows anything about anything there. They just hire people. A guy was putting down a path for me in one of the greenhouses, and he's like, "It's great. When it gets wet, it's hard as clay." And I'm like, "But it's sand." And he's like, "But no, but when it dries, it gets this white powder on top." I'm like, "It's sand." He's like, "But it's good. It'll drain." I'm like, "It's sand. Stop calling it clay and hard." Like, he had no concept. And so hopefully by the end of this, however long it takes for me to talk, you'll understand why it's totally two different things and you can't call sand clay. So, has that group come in now? Everyone's out from in the lobby? I think so. Good. So first, this is what your soil looks like in your yard. Hopefully, there's topsoil is your first layer, and then there's organic matter, which is mixed with the minerals, and then underneath is your clay or sand or silt, and then you get into the harder bedrock. So depending on where you are, that will vary in depth. And yeah, so a few terminologies. Organic matter, that's basically compost. So anything plant or animal remains. Soil texture, that's where we're getting into the sand, silt, or clay aspect of it. And then garden structure is your mixture of organic matter with the minerals. So that, just to kind of clarify if I'm using a term, those are all three different things. Like I said, science class. So we're going to start pretending you get a soil test, right? So depending on your soil, if it's brand new or even if you've used it a lot, you can pick up a soil test and it'll tell you what nutrients are in there. Super easy to do. I did it out there. It told me, this is what it told me about my soil. It said I had, all right, organic matter in the dirt, and it told me I had a bunch of nutrients. We're going to actually kind of work through in hopes that you can read this and understand what it's saying by the end as well. So when you do the soil test, which the farm feed stores have them, and you just take samples, really easy. Wherever you want your garden, go out, choose a few spots throughout. You mix all the soil together, try and get out rocks or sticks. It gives you instructions how dig to deep. You mix it together, put it in a bag, put it in a box, and you mail it away, and they email you the results. So this is from A&L Labs. It was recommended to me by an avid gardener at work, and they're just in London, so it's super easy. So yeah, and they emailed me this, and they also emailed me a bunch of recommendations based on this, how much fertilizer to put on. We'll get into fertilizer in a little bit, but we're just going to look at this and all the proponents of it. So then, here we are at the sand, clay. So there's three types. There's three corners on here, right? There's your sand at this corner, your clay at the top, because that's the majority of it, and your silt. Here in this area is clay, but if you go out Tilsonburg, It become, even past Tilsonburg to Stratfordville, it becomes sand. So, and even one of the gardens, we have videos, I visited people and videotaped their gardens. When she said she had clay, but if you go to the other side of the field, it turns into pure sand. So what do? We are going to, this is why I have this bucket. We're gonna try, and so on your, I'm sorry, I'm scattered. Focus, all right. On a few pages over, I've got the actual instructions on how to do a soil test. It's not the easiest, and there's a ton of other ways on internet, but I've taken a bunch of classes, and they keep getting me to do it this way. So before this morning, I went out into that garden, and I dug up a bunch of dirt. And we're gonna try and figure out what it is in there. So it's kind of wet already, but I want to add a bit more water to it to make it more like a play dirt. And so there's a few different ways. Do I have it on a slide now? My hand's dirty. Nope, we don't want to go there. So you add a little bit of water at a time, because if you add too much, then you have to add more dirt. And you kind of take it and make it into a ball. That might have been too much, but that's okay. You roll it up, and then how is it feeling? Is it feeling gritty? What does it say? If it's able to form a ball, it is not sand. So I'm able to go like this and like that, and it's holding together, so therefore it is not sand, right? If it didn't hold together and it feels a little gritty, it is feeling a little gritty as I do this, so there's probably a little bit of sand or clay in it, but it's still holding together. So now I want to try, I've got a few different ways. So this was the first one of just, it's sticking to me. So like I said, we're just going with the top one right now, and it's not really smooth, but it's still holding together. So it's not sand, so I've got to move to the bottom one. Not flaky, it's ribbon test. What is the ribbon test? So basically, I've got stones in there. I tried not to get stones. Yeah, I added too much water. See? Kind of takes some playing around. Sorry, guys. Now my hands are good and clayey. But as you make the ribbon, how long can it get? How well does it hold together? So you can squish through, and if it wasn't so wet, it wouldn't fall apart so much. But it actually, so it is still holding together. So I would say it's probably a lot more clay than not. So it's probably more if you kind of, am I making sense, guys? Not at all. I'm sorry. Okay, let me start this again. The first part, texture feel method, right? I went through, it feels a little gritty, so there is some sand, but it's holding together, so therefore it's mainly clay, right? You can do, what else does it, so now we're going to go, so it's mainly clay, so we go to the bottom where it's, less sand. So the bottom thing on your printout. And if it's weak, it won't be able to roll. But I'm able to make a nice worm, right? That's holding together. So it is a fairly strong cast. It's supporting its own weight. It's grainy but moderately sticky. So if you're looking at the feel test, that's where I'm getting the sticky from. And it is not smooth, so it's not pure clay. I should have it on there, and I don't. But are you guys now following? Okay, now you're following. Good, now I'm doing this. Good. So So it's somewhere in between clay loam. It's not really shiny. It is shiny only because I have water in it, but it's not, it is shiny. It's not super shiny, slight shiny. We'll go with slight shiny, right? Because it's not very shiny. You can rub it on something metal as well. So you take your shovel and make a nice flat spot in the moisture that comes up. That's slightly shiny. I wouldn't say that's super shiny. So it's not super clayey, which is good. I also know as the soil test said, we have organic matter. So that's going to take away a bit of the shine as well. So yeah, it takes a little playing around with. I've only done this a few times and it's worked. So slightly shiny, holds its cast, holds it when I make a worm, and it doesn't fall apart. So kind of going through that worksheet, I would say it's probably a clay loam soil in there. Did we follow? Was I able to do that? Yes. I see some nodding heads. Okay. So now I know what kind of soil I have because, yeah, understood? Questions, please. What?
Are you going to do the taste test?
I have a volunteer? No, I'm not. I'm not going to do the taste test. Where's the taste test? Oh, if it's gritty. No, I can just feel what it's going to taste like. Dirt. Okay, so I hope that wasn't super confusing. Yes, Chris? This is a rough test. It is. I mean, I didn't get there's not sand, so I couldn't do a sandy example where it will just fall apart, but right now it's sticking to me, right? So sand, you're gonna know it's not going to hold the ball. It's going to feel different. It's gonna be more gritty than this. It's not gonna be as shiny. You won't be able to roll it into, if you're playing with Play-Doh or something and they get it all dirty and it just doesn't stick the way, or you're making bread and it's too floury or something, it doesn't stick together. I don't make bread a lot, so I don't know. But it just won't hold together. You want it, clay is gonna look like that. I'm not saying you want it to look like that, but clay is going to be more togetherness. Yep. So, any more questions before I wash my hands? No? Okay, clear as mud. Good. We know what kind of soil we have. We have a little bit more clayey soil with a bit of silt, so that's not bad. Why we care about what kind of soil we have? Clay actually is a smaller particle. So it is a finer particle size, which means A, it can compact more, B, it compacts more, where did it go? But it holds more fertilizer because it actually has, it naturally has an electronic charge, so it can hold more fertilizer. Sand, even though it's small grit, has larger surface area, so there's less actual sand in the same volume, so therefore you're not going to hold as much fertilizer. If you have a whole bunch of small pieces, you have more, because it can fill up the area thicker, right? If you put a bunch of marbles, you got a lot of airspace. If you put in sand, you have less airspace. Now shrink that down, and it's the same with clay and sand. And silt is even finer, or somewhere in the middle. So it is in between the sizes of clay, clay being the smallest, sand being the biggest size. So you've got your big marbles, your small marbles, and then tennis balls for sand, right? Yeah.
Would you say that with sand, then you need to fertilize more because it actually washes through?
Yes, so with sand, that's exactly it. He asked if sand, you have to fertilize more. Yes. So we'll keep walking through this for why this is important, to know what kind of soil you have.
And if you have straight clay, what's the best thing to do?
If you have straight clay, we'll keep going and we'll get into that as well. So it's kind of actually the same solution if you have sand or clay. You add organic matter. So you know what kind of soil you have, but how compact is it? So that's why people rototill their gardens, or they don't rototill, because now, like I was saying, depending on the size of the marbles, it can totally smush down. So it's the same mass in those two squares, but once you compact it, it gets a lot smaller. So sand isn't going to compact as much because there's bigger air spaces naturally. Clay is smaller, so you can smoosh it together closer. So you get a harder, that's why clay is a harder substance, and you can make pottery out of clay and not sand. So this is where it comes into watering and whatnot. So like I said, there's more surface area with clay. So that's why people rototill, is to break that up, get that airspace in there, and naturally kind of, because the roots want air and places to go. So when you water, like I said, this is where we get into the soil actually has charges. So like static charges, you put the balloon on your head, your hair follows, right? Water will actually be attracted to the soil particles. And so you can see where's my pointer? These are attracted to that, so it's going to hold more firmly. Their adhesion is a stronger bond than cohesion. So the cohesion is water being bonded to itself, right? If you have a water droplet, it doesn't just spread out, it kind of stays clumped to itself. That's its fun property. It's a fun property with water. It does bond to itself, but it's a weaker bond than if it's attached to an actual other particle. So when you've got water there, that's going to stay more bound to the soil than the adhesion or even the gravitational water flowing through. Yes? Okay, I'm trying. So when you've got a field and it's saturated, you've got tons of water, right? The plant's happy, but you're going to lose most of that water if the soil isn't compacted to gravitational flow. And so as it drains, it's going to reach field capacity. So you can soak your plant, it's going to drain naturally, which is what we all want, and then you're going to be left with something that looks like this, water attached to the soil particle, and then some water attached to the water particles. That's what you want. That is how you want, what did I do? This is the water that is available to the plant. This is going to be harder for the plant to get. So as the plant uses it and as evaporation happens, you're going to lose your water. So again, if you have clay, you're going to have more of this because you have more surface area because the particles are smaller. So it's going to stay wetter longer. So yes, with sand, you're going to have less of it because you have less water space and you have more, or soil surface, and you have more space for water to move freely, so it's going to disappear faster. All right, so basically, clay will stay wetter longer, as is probably known. If you guys have clay soil, you just get puddles. The fields out here are all clay, so that's why they're just soaked right now. And in sand, it's just going to move through and it drains better, right? So that is why, again, why it matters whether you have clay or sand or somewhere in the middle. Oop, too far. Okay, soil water. What else did I want to say about that? Yep. Moving along, because this is a lot of sciencey stuff. But we're all following so far still? Okay, good. Now we get into the fertilizer. Okay? This is a different graph than I attached in your guys' graph because I found it after I made it, and I was like, ooh, this is a better graph. But it says the same thing. pH of a soil. pH, I'll go, you've got your acidic on this side of the graph, so I like actually your graph, so battery acid, stomach acid, tomatoes, and alkaline on the other side, if I can read it, bleach, I can't read it, and other acidic things. Blood is more basic, and then if you're taking something because you have acid in your stomach, you're taking calcium because it's more basic to neutralize, right? So plants are funny in that they're picky about what their pH is. If you've ever heard you need blue acidic soil for blueberries, right? That's because plants actually are happiest around the 6.5 mark of acidity. So water is supposed to be 7. That's neutral. That's considered neutral. Soil, you actually want to be on the opposite side and a little bit more acidic. Because some things, so right about, oh, I see what I did. I cut off right about here. Oh, there's the blue mark. That's about 6.5, 6. That's where the best nutrient uptake takes place. So if you look at this graph, you can see how iron tapers off. This is about 7. So iron really doesn't do a good job. Plants don't do a good job at taking up iron here, or all these others. These are the 3 big ones you want. Iron's actually still pretty big on the list, and these are micro fertilizers. So that's why plants want to live here, because they can best uptake this. Some plants are even worse at uptaking iron, so that's why they want to be more acidic, such as blueberries. So that is why some of them say they want more acidic soil, because they are bad at taking up certain nutrients under more alkaline conditions. Yes? I'm kind of looking at your faces. Yeah. So when you buy fertilizer, nope, I'm not going to go that far yet. I'm trying to make this make sense. So again, with that, this is where, again, it's going to go this way. This is where the fertilizer comes in with your type of soil and how it leaches. We're going to go all the way back to my soil test. Right here it has cation exchange capacity. Okay? So that is how well your soil will hold a charge to hold on to those nutrients. So mine is out there is about 17. I don't know, it doesn't give me an optimal range, it's just telling me that's what my soil is. Is it about 17.3? So that's confusing. I didn't like that when they told me that, because I was like, well, what am I supposed to be at? What's good? But because I know it's clay, it's probably better than if it was sand, because it has more surface area, so it's holding on. So now we'll go back to this. So if this is our soil, plants produce hydrogen. Hydrogen, that's one of their byproducts in the whole photosynthesis thing, and they actually release hydrogen out their roots. So hydrogen is positively charged, what they produce. When you water your soil with fertilizer, the fertilizer also has charges, so that is potassium, and it's positively charged, so it bonds to your soil, right? So it's bonded now to your soil particle, and it's going to stay there. So the plant produces hydrogen, which is also a stronger charge, so it trades spots with the potassium, giving it making the potassium now available to your plant, so the plant can uptake it. So that's every now and then, all of a sudden now your soil can be all filled with hydrogen, which the plant doesn't need. So that's why you have to fertilize, and that will flush out the hydrogen and replace it with fertilizer. All right? So again, you have more clay soil, you're going to get more bonds taking place because you have greater surface area than sand, which is less surface area, and so it doesn't bond as well as clay. All right, so that's where, so this doesn't necessarily, so this iron here, this, I'm picking on iron because it is actually the main reason you like acidic soil, because it is really bad. It's like people, we don't uptake certain iron, right? Like if you look at the cereal box, I've heard if you eat iron in cereal, like it doesn't actually do anything. It's not processed to actually be uptook into your body. So it's the same with plants. If it's not processed properly, the plants can't do anything with it, which is why it needs the acidic. Okay, right? So that is CEC, cation exchange capacity. So that's the capacity your soil has to hold on to the fertilizer you put into it to release it. All right? You guys are all very intent. I can't read your faces. So now the part that actually is of interest after all of that. Fertilizer. What you're going to do. Okay, I added, because I wasn't sure how to do it, I have soil amendment lists. This is literally my school notes. Instead of trying to transpose it, I just copied and pasted it because for the most part, it makes sense. Because this is what a lot of people are asking, which was just asked here, what do you do for your soil? How do you amend it? So, like I said, organic matter, that actually is going to add a lot. So a lot of these you're going to see alfalfa, blood meal, fertilizer, coffee grounds. You put that into your soil, and it's going to break down, make those nutrients available into your existing soil, and they're going to bind to the soil and then be saved and used later, right? So that's how why compost is good. Now, let me just, if we look over some of this, let's go back to I'm going back. My soil test. It said I didn't have much phosphorus. So it gave me recommendations on chemical phosphorus I can put in. But if we go to my list, and you can Google this, I think I added some links at the bottom of the second page, and they're super great. They will tell you everything of what to do. So you would kind of go through, can I add for phosphorus bone meal? And it really is a slow release, so it's not going to be a quick release answer to phosphorus. But I can add it to the holes, and it will help increase the phosphorus level in my soil, right? It also says I could use some calcium. So if I look at my list, calcium, dolomite, lime, which also raises the pH to neutralize it. Well, okay, so I need no, I don't need calcium. I had tons of calcium. Never mind, it was magnesium I needed. No, I don't need calcium. Magnesium, also dolomite, lime. Or Epsom salt. I actually use Epsom salt every day at the greenhouse in our fertilizer. And so I can add Epsom salt. Now, while doing that, you want to be careful that you don't add too much, because you can go the opposite direction and burn your plants. Don't forget that. Too much fertilizer is actually also bad. But this gives you a guideline of how to now read this and say, okay, I've got this. What do I do? The tricky part is, so talking to somebody, the internet was telling her she needed phosphorus. So she's looking on the internet, and we came across bone meal, but you look at, I don't actually have a slide with the 3 numbers, but if you look at fertilizer, it's going to say NPK, right? That's nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. And it has its different levels. And it goes, this is how I remember it, up, down in flowers, and all around. So nitrogen helps the plant grow up. Phosphorus helps the roots and the flowers. And then potassium helps the nutrients get everywhere. So that will also help you if you're looking at a flower and it's not flowering, you want to add phosphorus. If the plant's not growing, you want to add nitrogen. So up, down in flowers, and all around. That's what does nitrogen do? It helps up. It helps the plants grow up. Phosphorus, roots and flowers. Potassium, it just helps everything get everywhere. But yeah, so she wanted phosphorus, but it was also going to add a ton of nitrogen. She didn't want nitrogen because she didn't want the plants to keep growing up. She wanted them to stay small. So that's with using natural fertilizers, you're going to get not the exact mix you want. That's when you go to the chemical fertilizers, and I feel like I'm about to tread on a lot of not wants. But you know what? They're not bad. They're not horrible. Sometimes you just need to use the chemical fertilizer. I mean, it's just mined minerals anyway, and then that way you can hunt down just phosphorus and add it in the concentration they recommend. And it's not a bad thing. It's not going to, the plant's just uptaking the property, the element, literally element, of the fertilizer you're giving it and using it to what it needs it to do, right? So it's just a way, sometimes that's why we have chemical fertilizers, is sometimes you have to be that precise to get what you want. There are a ton on this list. I've noticed, because I've worked in a garden center a lot of years, and usually what you go in and you buy is 20-20-20 fertilizer. It's all purpose, and you stick it on everything, right? What happens then is your water, when you water, the plant's not going to use it. It's either going to clog the soil with salt. So if we go back to here, you're going to get all these particles your plant doesn't need attached to the soil because it's not using it, or as it makes it water, as you water it, it's going to unattach and it's just going to flush out. So you're literally just flushing minerals back out into wherever the water drains. So that's why too much nitrogen causes problems in algae blooms and whatnot, and in the soils, and why the rivers are just clogged with farmer fertilizer, because they're not using all of it the way the plant wants. They're just dumping tons on. And so when I water at the greenhouse, we don't use 20-20-20 ever. We have like 85-100, right? So that's a small number in there. In the middle, so half of, if I was using 20-20-20, half of that would just be flushing out of the water because the plant didn't need it, and it would just be draining into our pond in the back, which is literally what happens. So now, with the onset of new crops being allowed to grow, you can get a ton of different, very specific chemicals available. So as horrible as it is that these new crops are on the market and legal, it's changed the fertilizer game. You can, on the garden center shelves, you can be very specific. You can get, if you want it to bloom and flower, so if you need that phosphorus, you can buy that phosphorus bloom, they'll call it bloom and buds. There you go, your tomatoes are happy, right? At that stage in its game. But don't forget your micronutrients, because a lot of times people just focus on those 3, but you do need all of those, because then your plants will start turning different colors of yellow in different spots. Yeah. So you can go to the garden center, find what you need, and hopefully kind of mix and match rather than just buy 2020. Or if you want tons of different options, they sometimes cost a bit more. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't even know what that is. Saparel? I don't. Dolomalic lime, a little harder to find, a little more expensive, but it does do the trick. It will also, if you have, side note, if you have moss on your lawn, add lime. That takes away the moss, because that means your soil is too acid. Yeah, because it's probably really wet, so it's probably nice and acidic, so you want to add lime. So yeah, so those are your fertilizers. There's a list here. I hope it helps a lot, because there is a lot. I could go on. This is a whole day's worth of lessons on fertilizers, and I don't know if I'm able to articulate it well enough. So here is, there's some cycles that happen naturally. I just kind of included it to give you an idea why it can be so hard to get certain minerals naturally, such as phosphorus. Phosphorus or phosphates come from rocks. So you saw the list, there's not a whole lot of rocks on that list of fertilizers. So it's something that it's literally the breaking down of rocks over time. So the urine breaks down the rocks, the plants break down the weathering of rocks. That's how you get the phosphates in the soil. Was that phosphates or potassium? Yeah. So it can be a little bit trickier to get natural fertilizers sometimes, why you end up with the bone meal or whatnot. Yes. All right. To the end of your soil is all the things that live in it. So I have gone kind of fast. I don't even know what time it is. Not bad. But how does this all play together with your soil life? So we're going to watch videos after our break of 2 different soil techniques. One lady who doesn't till and one lady who has, and they've chosen these for different reasons. But the no-till and even the till, you're trying to build up the soil life. So if you have clay and it's compact as all get out, you have no soil life in there, right? There's nothing growing. There's no room for air to breathe. And it can't do anything. If it rains, it's going to flood, and it just becomes a mushy mess, right? Sand, opposite, everything flushes out. So you still need to build that up with the organic matter slowly over time. And so there is a ton that can be living in your soil that after time of working your soil over, you're going to get. And you want it growing. So there are the roots, and on the roots there are bacteria. So you don't want sterile soil, you want the bacteria. You want the fungi. So a lot of times you'll see little funguses growing. It's not a bad thing, it's natural. They're all over the place. You'll see a few different words on your soil if you're buying potting soil or dirt soil called mycorrhizae. They are a fungus. Do I have it on this diagram? No. Mycorrhizae is a fungus that naturally occurs in the soil, but it attaches itself to the root. And then it becomes part of the plant, and it kind of works in a symbiotic fashion with the plant in that it goes out, looks for the nutrients, and because it's a fungus, it can create even more of a network throughout the soil than the roots possibly could. And so then you're getting more nutrients out of the soil with the mycorrhizae. There are different kinds of mycorrhizae. They might get picky about which one is which, but that's what that means when you buy a bag of soil that says mycorrhizae, or if you, I know for a while at the garden center, you bought a tree from me, I was also gonna sell you a little packet to water with it so that it would, of specific mycorrhizae, so that it would help build the soil up around your tree right away. So those are out there to help you add stuff that if you were growing in a field like this, or if you're in a suburban residence that's just been lawn and kids have played on it and dogs have peed on it, and who knows what's in there, to build that soil up, you can add that in there slowly over time to help get that life back in there. Another thing you might see is nematodes. Those are a popular word in garden centers, most commonly associated with Japanese beetles. So nematodes, again, just actually more of a parasite, I'll call it. I like to call it that. It infects. They're very specific now. So they work along with the soil, in the soil, but they will get into the grubs you don't want and make the grubs sick and kill them. So, but they're very specific. They're not going to hurt worms. They're not going to hurt other beneficials that you want in your soil. But you can see the worms are making air so that the roots can grow, right? So obviously you want the worms. I'm hoping we know that. Yeah, so that is hopefully a whole overview stuck into 45 minutes of soil life and figuring out what to do. So the take home is just add more compost. And then from there, if you continue to rototill, that's not a bad thing, especially if it's really compact. And then you can just kind of gradually do what your garden kind of tells you what it needs. It's like, oh, this is really fluffy. I don't necessarily need to rototill it this year. But soil test, not a bad idea, because if something's not working well, and I mean, you can go on the internet and it'll tell you, so your leaves are turning purple, going back to the example of why she needed phosphorus. The internet says, you need phosphorus because the leaves are turning purple. So they can be that specific of knowing, well, is it the older leaves that are turning purple? Is it the newer leaves that are turning purple? Because if it's the older ones, then you still have potassium, but if it's the newer ones, you don't have any potassium because that fertilizer isn't getting what the plant wants to do, is take fertilizer from the older plants or older leaves and give it to the new growth. It's always trying to support the new growth. So now you know you don't have any potassium either. So it can get super complicated and very specific to what you need really quick if you kind of have a general overview of just all that your plant needs right away, right? So you can start to hopefully understand all this other jargon that the internet might tell you as you start to Google what's wrong with my plant.
Does it react quick enough? Let's say your plants are turning yellow.
Right.
What's going on?
So that's
Test, and by the time you get the results back and you want fertilizer to go on, isn't it too late?
right. So the question was, does it react quick enough? So if you're adding those organic fertilizers, will it react quick enough for your plants? Not always. Good question. Because it needs time to break down and kind of work into your soil. So if you're having an immediate problem, that's when the chemicals, those are instant. You'll see that instantly as a reaction. But over time, then you can add the organic stuff, the compost and whatnot, the bone meal, the alfalfa meal, to work into it slowly, because now you know your soil has this deficiency. So next year you can start to increase, or that at that time, but next year it'll help increase as you slowly build it back in, because it'll take a little bit. So yeah, good question. No, instantly organic, not necessarily. Or if you do liquid form, like if you make teas, they make teas, there's recipes, I've never tried it, that breaks it down already, but again, you're going to want to, it's telling you the problem, there's quick fixes, and then you can work on the gradual fixes over time, because it'll be a problem later on. All right? Yeah. Oh, do we want to use the mic for questions? Just so that way I don't have to repeat them, and then we're recording it.
Is it working?
Is the mic on? One sec.
Can't hear.
Try it.
Is
Talk.
it working? Is it
Keep
working?
talking.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
question number one: if you rototiller, you've got all that earthworms. Are you not killing the earthworms?
They'll come back. Yeah, I mean, a lady, and you'll see it in the video, if you rototill it, there's not necessarily, the earthworms, you're not going to kill them all. And there's ones deeper, there's ones from the outside, they'll come in because they'll like the soil better. If it's super compact, they're not going to be there anyway, or they're not going to like life anyway. And as you add stuff, they'll start coming in. So no, it won't, the immediate need of rototilling outweighs the longevity, the benefits, I think, of eventually it will be built up, the worms will be there. But if it's compact enough, you need to rototill it, but they always come back. People who,
And the
yeah.
second question, hydroperoxide. If you actually use hydroperoxide, mix it with water, is that good for your soil?
Hydrogen peroxide?
Hydrogen peroxide, yeah, that you buy in a shop, the 3%.
Yeah, hydrogen peroxide. Is that on my list of things to add? I use hydrogen peroxide to kill stuff at the greenhouse all the time. I will add it to, I'm going to go with just a general no. From my experience, because in my use of hydrogen peroxide, I will shower it on plants to kill bad bacteria or fungi that I don't want killing my seedlings, or I'll spray it, or if I get it on my hand, it eats away my hand instantly. It hurts, don't do it. But basically what hydrogen peroxide is doing is killing all living organisms it comes in contact with, all right? So, yeah, that's what it does. It will kill whatever it comes in contact with. So I'm going to go with an overall no unless someone smarter than me recommends it to you as a very specific solution to a problem. I use it to kill bad bacteria that I know exists in an area I want sterile anyways, because in a greenhouse, I don't have good or bad. If it's there, it's probably bad, so I'm killing it with hydrogen peroxide. But it would be unspecific and kill the good. Yeah.
I've used hydrogen peroxide
Okay.
when starting seeds.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so starting seeds. I use hydrogen peroxide for if there's like some green algae on top or
Sure.
something, and
Right.
it doesn't hurt the plants anyway.
No, it wouldn't hurt the plants if you use it at the right concentration. So he said, if you missed the beginning of it, he's used it for starting seeds. That makes sense, right? You want a sterile environment. You're not necessarily in the garden, or you're in the garden and you're just doing a top thing, only on those, because it's not going to give a long-lasting effect. So yeah, I use it in the greenhouse on my seedlings all the time, because I don't want, it can help with dampening off and whatnot. But in a garden, I wouldn't, unless you're starting seedlings in the garden and for some reason you're having rot and mold, that's probably a different issue then. You could try it, but yeah, seedlings, that makes sense. Thanks, Greg. Yeah. No. That answer your question? I'm not going to give, she asked what percentage of hydrogen peroxide I use. I'm not going to give that answer because as my, in a garden center, I wouldn't, because it's not, I could tell you something and it's going to die and you're going to come back and be like, you told me. I would use a very little percentage but I don't know. Yeah. Oh, use the, yep.
What I'm asking you is because I've used it on
Right.
plants
Yeah.
to kill like mildew.
Yes.
And it works, but you need to dilute it.
Yes.
It's the internet is full of, there's a percentage.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
even I had a test once with butter squash. One year
Right.
there was a worm or something, and it actually killed
okay.
everything. And then the next year I sprayed it.
Yeah.
I never had an issue.
Okay.
But somebody says, or the internet also says, if you dilute it with water and then put it on your ground, you give oxygen to the soil again.
It
so
might.
I don't.
I don't.
That's the one question.
Okay, so adding it to the ground is different from putting it on the plants. Like I said, I spray it to get algae off of the plants. So yes, that would work. Again, the internet has tons of concentrations and levels on it. That's why I'm not going to recommend anything. You can look it up, and that's now in your hands, not mine, when you burn the leaves. Disclaimer notes. But adding it to the soil to add, the internet's full of, I wouldn't because maybe it's adding hydrogen or air back to your soil, but rototilling and adding compost would also do that without killing, because it will kill any good bacteria. Like I said, you get it on your hands turn white, it hurts, wash with water for 20 minutes. So that's why I'm like, that's why I'm like, there's other ways to do it, to add air to your soil, than using a chemical that will kill all your good bugs. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Oh, you guys were an easy crowd. I hope it made sense. I hope you guys are able to interpret what I just said and, apply that to your gardens and your garden prep.